Today we're going to be talking about boosting your project profits and really talking about those three legs of the project management stool when it comes to, making sure that we're running our projects as effectively as possible. And, too often we're kind of have our head in the sand, right? We like to think our projects are going well. And to be honest with you, it's like most of the time we don't find out until like that last quarter of the project that, hey, you know what, looks like we're going to start missing. And at that point, it's just a roller coaster ride that we're hanging on for. We want to be more proactive in this. And, when we're talking about being proactive with project management, comes down to three major things. Number one, nowadays, project management is all about mitigating risk. Where's the risk? Usually, the biggest risk to any work that you're self-performing is going to be your labor. So we want to keep an eye on your labor, but also we need to keep on our document control, right? Making sure our change orders are getting processed in a timely manner. Making sure that we've got visibility into our ordering, into our purchasing. And then, of course, before we can usually kick off any project, got to get our submittals approved, get our RFIs answered, and be able to track those along the way. Second big item is going to be your field office communication. And number one, or more times than not, the first person who has eyes on the job, who sees that there's going to be a problem, is your field lead, right? You all might call them superintendents. You might call them foremen. You might call them, leads. Whatever you call them, those guys are your best tools for documenting what's going out on their job site. Now, too often we're just calling that information back to the office. Maybe we're taking pictures, and texting those back to the project manager, but there's not a real formal way for them to document what work was completed, what problems they're running into, and, are they trying to give away anything for free out there? And then the old saying, last but not least, is you can't manage what you can't measure. So we're going to talk a lot about reporting and making sure that we're going to make this information highly visible. A lot of the different softwares out there really force you to dive in multiple layers and multiple screens to see certain pieces of information. BuildOps with the reporting engine is able to surface that information to you in a dashboard across all of your projects. We can also have, let's say, weekly or daily emails that go out to the team that let them know which RFIs are outstanding, how they're looking on their labor budgets, how we're looking, for material procurement. Are there any items we need to order, et cetera? So, the old saying is you can't manage what you can't measure, and we're going to give you the tools to be able to measure those things. When we're talking about risk, a couple big things, right? It's making sure we get the materials ordered on time because there's always a big lead time on that stuff. Change orders, right? Too often, those change orders are actually getting sent for approval when we're way too far along with the job to really have any leverage. If you're about 90% of the done with the job and you're trying to get paid on a change order, you only had 10% of the bargaining power that you did earlier on. So we want to get those change orders in early for approval. And then also, again, keep an eye on that labor because number one risk is going to be running over, not just running over on hours, but also looking at, if we're going to be running over on dollars. What we'll take a look at today for the field office communication, big one's going to be the mobile app, right? Being able to see out there in the field information that our folks in the office have made available to us, but then go in both directions and allowing them to surface information back to us, directly from the field through that mobile app. So we'll definitely be taking a look at that. And then also, making sure that there's one source of truth for our documentation, right? Being able to centralize our plans, our specifications, our RFIs, our submittals. When I talk to folks quite often, they're using a lot of different systems out there, right? They're using Dropbox, they're using Google Drive, they're using, Microsoft, they're using everything in between. The problem is that's usually only for one part. Now they're using another software and another software and another software, and you find yourself out in the field having fatigue. So, one way, folks are always struggling, right, with the adoption of technology. One way to make that adoption of technology a lot less, a lot less painful for the guys out in the field is, making sure that we're just giving them one piece of software to interact with, and not asking them to be IT professionals trying to decode what is the appropriate software to use for the particular situation. And then when you have that situation, you lose standardization as well, which is going to be big. With that said, we do want to hit lastly on reporting, budgeting, forecasting, full blown WIP reporting. Right, we're going to take a look at all that today. So let's go ahead and hop in. And first thing that we're going to look at today is like back office view of a project. Put your project manager hat on. Right, I'm a project manager. I'm a VP of ops. I'm a operations manager. Whomever is running projects or monitoring how projects are going. This is the first thing that we're going to discuss today. Now, the way I like to explain how project management works is I like to lay it out just like how I used to run work before there was, softwares out there. We're talking 15, 20 years ago at this point. But, we would essentially have like a folder. And a lot of times those were physical folders. Over the years, they became digital folders. But essentially, we would have one folder where we'd stuff all the project documentation in there. Hopefully, everybody filed their folders the same way. And hopefully, that folder didn't get knocked behind somebody's desk and all that information lost. You want to think about build ops kind of in a similar sort of like folder structure, if you will. You can think of these projects as folders. And if I pop open one of these projects, let's say Jefferson High School, over here on the left, kind of think of these as like your tool belt for the project, right? We've got our dashboard, our project planning. I'll go through each of these so you know what we'll be talking about. Field reports, right, from the guys out in the field, RFIs, change orders, submittal packages, bill of materials and purchasing, finance. So we're talking about billing and we're talking about budgeting. And then, of course, like, hey, where are we going to store a lot of these documents with files and drawings down here at the bottom? First place I land when I hit a project is the project dashboard. Now, what I like about the project dashboard is it's surfacing all of the information that's contained within the project on a single page. Now, I can give you a very similar or identical dashboard that will show you information across all of your projects. Keep in mind that any piece of information that I've gone to the trouble of entering into Build Ops is now going to be reportable for me. And I can build custom dashboards and custom reports. This is just an example of one, taking a look at how our contract's performing, understanding the billing side of things, how many dollars do we have outstanding, looking down at what our margins are, right? I've been running this job for a long time, so getting a little bit behind. And then as we roll down here at the bottom, making a highlight on the labor again. And we'll talk about how we can plan for labor, how we can schedule labor, and then track actual labor hours and labor costs. But we're bubbling these up. Now, this, while the numbers are a little out of hand, the the point that it's proving is still valid. Not only can I go over on labor hours, but I can also go over on labor dollars. And what we want to do is understand the makeup of our crews to make sure that we've got the right folks on the job, so that we're going to hit our blended labor rates. So, just because I'm under on hours doesn't mean I'm going to be under on dollars if I've got too many high priced guys out there. So keeping a close eye on our blended labor rates. And then last but not least, being able to see our document control, right? Where is the risk on this project? The risk is going to be those outstanding change order dollars, the unanswered or unapproved submittals, the overdue RFIs, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a little bit. That said, I want to go ahead and talk on something that's near and dear to my heart, which would be our field to office communication. Because this is something that whenever I was running work, my background is in construction. I've been a field superintendent, project manager, estimator, and spent the last 10 years now in construction software. But prior to that, I was out there running jobs, and we would essentially have prints and folders that would be handed back and forth between the field and the office, and there was always a delay with that information, assuming it didn't just get lost in the van anyway. So what we'll do here is we'll go ahead and pull up our mobile app up on the screen, and our mobile app is going to be typically geared for your foreman out in the field, right? With the Website, build ops being cloud based. The website is typically for your project managers back in the office. And then what we see over here on the left on the phone, typically you're foreman out in the field. Now they'll see a list of the projects that you've given them access to, and they'll be able to click into one of those projects. And hitting one of the first things that we want to talk about is our field reports. So, our folks out in the field are able to come in and fill out what we would call a daily report. Now, my daily report's got a few different sections. Basically, what I want to know from my guys is what work was performed, what did you do out there, what problems did you run into? Are there any sort of delays or issues? And then ultimately, is there any sort of out of scope work that we've been asked to do that ultimately we might need to bill for? So giving them an area to do each of those. Now, out in the field, we make it very nice and compact to fit on any of the mobile devices. The BuildOps app is available for both Android and Apple devices, whether those are phones or tablets. Now, a lot of times it's the phone that's in their pocket. So that's what I'm using today. And we want to make this as portable as possible because the best information we can get is information at the time of incident, not last, a week later. I don't know what it is about, good night's sleep, a home cooked meal, or maybe it's a couple adult beverages, but you wake up the next morning with amnesia. So if you're not tracking this at the time of incident, the details and the accuracy starts to degrade. So want to keep it portable so that as soon as something happens, they can come in here and put in some notes. Now, how do they do that? I just go ahead and select one of these sections. We'll say work completed. We can pop that open. And most of the time, we want to utilize the talk to type feature. That's the easiest way to get a lot of information into the system quickly. Also, BuildOps allows for the end user to speak in their native language, whether that's Spanish, or for our folks up in Montreal, you might be speaking French. They can do that into this section. And then if you just click the AI button down below, it'll automatically translate that back into English. Not a concern for everybody, but there's certainly folks who could find that very useful. Now, when I'm going to come in here and put in notes, I mentioned before, I'm going to utilize the talk to type feature. So we installed ductwork on floor 1, period, ran the returns through the lobby, and secured all the anchor points, period. Now, the old saying's a picture's worth 1,000 words. I can't tell you guys how many times in my career picture's been worth $1,000. And so we not only do we allow folks to put the notes in, they can also add photos or videos into the section here as well. Now, again, back in the office, I'm going to have a record of this in case I need to reference these later. Also, if I'm the project manager, I can see these notes across all of my projects emailed to me automatically at the end of the day, if that's something you all would like to see. So we'll scroll down here, see if we can't find something that we can use. And back here in the office is where we'll get that beautiful 8.5 by 11. But if needed, the foreman out in the field can also have let's call them the general contractor superintendent, or the construction manager, or whoever the owner's rep happens to be. There's something real sideways going on. Not only do we want to document that, we also want to document the fact that we made them aware of those issues. So with that said, we call it a customer signature, customer being whoever the owner's rep is. So they'll be able to sign off on this. We'll have that signature captured, and they'll, by signing off on it, also get an email copy of that document. So not only did we document it, we documented that we made them aware of that issue. And too often in construction, it's less about what did you know and more about when did you know it, because it's all about timing. I don't know if you all see this in your contracts today, but over the years, we've seen more and more of it, things like liquidated damages, delay claims, all sorts of stuff along those lines, where essentially we're inheriting a lot of risk by taking on this project, and going back to mitigating that risk. Documentation, especially for our guys out in the field, I think is something super helpful. Now, we mentioned this communication is going to be bi-directional. So through the daily report, I'm reporting information back to the folks in the office. Not only am I putting in notes, I can also fill out forms. BuildOps has a full blown integrated form building engine within our software. So any form startup, shutdown, any type of form like that, that you need the guys out in the field to fill out, you're able to generate those in the back office and essentially give them a library of forms that they can draw on whenever they need them. Safety forms, we see a lot of that. People running their safety forms through here. But what I wanted to point out, not only is this integrated within our platform, we're also able to pull in what we call smart field. Now, note that again, this is being optimized to fit on my phone. So it's just easy for me to scroll through this. But back in the office, I get that nice 8.5 by 11. Something like our project name, project address, or really any other information that is already living within the software, I'm able to then pre-populate that onto the technician's forms. So when they go to fill those out, they don't have to put in model numbers and serial numbers or project addresses or customer names or customer phone numbers. I'm going to be able to pre-populate that stuff for them. Besides the forms, another big part of what we're doing on the daily report is being able to capture what we call crew time. So we have two options, two major ways of tracking time on a project. I can either have the foreman fill out time for his crew, or I can have individuals fill out their own time. Up to you guys on which way you'd like to do it. With that said, if I want my foreman to do it, we allow them to enter in batches so they don't have to, you know, pound the keyboard too hard to get that time in, but then also allow them to edit individual entries if somebody had left early, something along those lines. With that said, we want to transition a little bit and talk about the a couple other options that we have here on the mobile app. One of those being the file folders. So we're going to pop back to the project here in the web so that we can see how these align going back and forth. Down here at the bottom of this Jefferson High School project, we'll see files and drawings. Now you're able to set up a default folder structure, and every time a new project is created in the system, it will automatically inherit that folder structure. Now, inevitably, you're going to have some folders that you don't want to share with the guys out in the field, you know, maybe something like signed contracts. So you're able to set permissions for those individual folders so that the information will only be shared with the people it's appropriate to share it with. That said, back over here on my mobile app, I could pop open one of those folders if I need to. You know, we could go, you know, answered RFIs or something along those lines. And then I can go ahead and, you know, view that document, any of its attachments, etc. Also, within this same area, we've got a section here called drawing. So while I could certainly just load a set of drawings into one of these folders, on the drawings module, what we're giving you a lot more horsepower. What we're able to do is upload a full drawing set, and BuildOps will sniff out the sheet numbers and sheet names of the individual sheets within that drawing set and break those into their own individual sections so that we can now start tracking the revisions, the last revision, and why that revision came out. And then I'm able to perform markups on these drawings, both here in the office as well as back in the field. So if I pop over here to the mobile app again, I can click on drawings, see those same sheets. I've got the ability to do markups. I can do the full pinch to zoom to see all the high fidelity details. We can track who's made changes. We can keep markups private and then publish them at a later date if we needed to. We can do measuring. We can do some light counting. We can also compare different revisions of either the same drawing to see what's changed or overlay two different sets because there's information on both sets that I'd like to take a look at the same time. So when we do that, we just select which sheet we want to overlay. In this case, it'll be a different sheet. And then what revision of that sheet. We got quite a few here. And then that'll go ahead and lay over and highlight any of the differences between the two. something really powerful on the drawing management. Again, historically, we've seen this type of functionality only available in standalone applications. So now you've got an application to manage your drawing, and a second application to manage your time, and then a third application like Dropbox or Microsoft to manage your files. So in just what we've shown you so far, we've taken half a dozen different apps and sort of consolidated that into one process. That said, we're not just doing that and only giving you the status quo. We're doing that, but also really leveraging BuildOps as a force multiplier so that we don't have to add back office personnel to manage these projects every time we want to take on new work. That said, this would be a good time to transition to what we would refer to as document control and mitigating the risks around that document control. Um, Not that it's a particularly exciting way to illustrate that, but a good place to start is with RFIs, right? A request for information. And essentially, what we're trying to do here is we're just trying to move these things from left to right. So from draft to sent, sent to responded, and then finally responded to close. And then we're going to be bubbling up those leading indicators of risk. Now, where's the indication of risk here on an RFI? It's going to be around those how overdue they are. And while again, this number, hopefully you don't see that on your real project, the point's still valid, right? If I see this number trending in the wrong direction, that's an indication that the owner or the GC is not doing a great job communicating with me on the job. They're probably not doing a good job communicating with other folks on the job. They're inevitably going to blow their schedule and do what they do best, which is to try to point the finger at somebody else. And so in general, an RFI is a great way to sort of shift that risk back onto them by saying, hey, listen, I asked you how to proceed and it took you 8 weeks to get back to me. Well, how do we do that? Let's talk about that functionally. Well, number one, to sort of create an RFI, I'm just going to hit the big green button over here on the right. And when I do, I just need to come in and fill in the blanks. Who's it going to? Who's it coming from? What's my subject? What question am I asking? And a lot of times we're asking one of these questions, but to be honest with you, we know the answer we want to hear back. So we try to disguise that as a recommendation, but essentially you're just looking at trying to get trying to get them to answer the question the way you would. Also, got to put them on notice, right? Is there going to be an impact to my timeline or an impact to my cost? Down here below, of course, when do I need this returned by to mitigate any delays on the job? And what happens by filling out this form is threefold. It will create a PDF document with this information on it. It'll store it in your log, and then you're now able to easily transmit this document to the parties outside your organization. Well, how do we transmit this document? We're going to do it via email. So let's pop open RFI number 2. And what you'll see with all of our documents, not just RFIs, but up here at the top, we see our communication history. And we'll talk a little bit about how that works. But what I want to point out is I sent this thing in October, never got an answer. Sent it again in January, still didn't get an answer. Sent it in June. I know it's a little hard to tell because I'm replying to myself, but finally in June, I got a response. Now, obviously, if they come knocking on my door asking why there was a delay on this project, but while there may be a dozen other reasons, it's a very well documented reason for that delay. So how does that work? Well, it's going to work basically like any other email you ever see, right? We'll go ahead and click email. You got a spot for a CC and a BCC. You can change the subject, obviously write your own body of the email. The RFI is attached. You can add any other attachments you want, and then you're able to transmit this thing directly to them out of BuildOps. Now, when I start talking about that email integration, my project managers, they tend to get a little bit nervous because the last thing they want on their side is a second place where they have to check emails. BuildOps isn't where you check emails. BuildOps isn't where you reply to emails. I'll kind of tell you how that's all done in just a second. But BuildOps is where you go if there's ever a question about a specific document, right? When did we send it? Who did we send it to? When did we get a response? Now, what we'll do here is we'll say this is BuildOps on this side. Over here, y'all might be using a bunch of different email servers. We'll just call this one Outlook. And then I don't care who y'all address this thing to. We'll just say we're sending it to the general contractor. That said, whenever I send this email and I hit that send email button out of build ops, a couple things are going to happen. One, copy's going to go in my Outlook, so I got a copy of it there. Copy's going to go to whoever I addressed it to, in this case, the general contractor, plus a copy stored here in build ops in case I need to reference it later. Well, why would I use build ops for referencing these emails later? I don't know if it's just me. It could very well be. But Outlook loves, whenever I search in Outlook, it loves to give me every single thing except that one email I was looking for. I don't know if it's just a sick trick Microsoft likes to play on me, but it seems pretty generic, right? Whenever we are using Outlook to search for those emails, inevitably we get a lot of junk, and it's no easier to find the one we're looking for. But now BuildOps will automatically route that to the correct document. So now it's not tied to this broader inbox. It's essentially tied to the document itself. Now, what happens when you get a reply? They're going to actually reply directly back to you. And when you reply to them, just like you would any other email out of Outlook or Gmail. And all that back and forth happens like any other email would, except because that original email came from BuildOps, there's now a binding code in the header of that email that'll then, anytime it's transmitted, also send a copy of it back to us as well. So again, if there's a question about change order number 12, RFI number 7, submittal package number 2, doesn't matter. You're able to go in and see the full communication history around the documents. Why? Because again, it's not what did you know, it's when did I tell you about it? And that's why that's important. Again, if y'all have any questions, feel free to throw those in the chat. Any that I'm not able to, or excuse me, in the Q&A section, any that I'm not able to get to, we'll be sure to follow up via email on this. Oh yeah, no, we got a couple good questions in there about labor tracking and scheduling. Let's go ahead and actually hop right into that right now. Within BuildOps, not only are we able to provide y'all with some document control, we're also able to provide y'all with some scheduling as well. Now, when we're talking about scheduling, it's a form that's familiar to most folks. Would be like you might refer to as like a Gantt schedule. Some folks will call it critical path, but essentially you've got tasks on a timeline that need to be performed. Now you're able to set up relationships between these tasks so that if something gets pushed out, like let's say programming gets pushed out and it's taking a little bit longer, everything else downstream gets pushed off as well, right? You can do starts to start, ends to starts, all the above. But where BuildOps is taking this one level deeper than like a Microsoft project or like a P6 Primavera, these common sort of project management scheduling tools that you all have seen in the past, is we're able to do our manpower loading against these different tasks. So let's say rough-in. It's like, great, it's gonna take me, 45 days to do rough-in, but what type of manpower needs do I have, to be able to get that finished? Now what we're able to do is understand, based on this timeline, how many man hours do we need? And this is making up a labor triangle that we're going to talk about. The tip of that triangle is what we're doing right now. It's called planned hours, right? These hours are specifically the ones that we're like scheduling. A lot of folks will have 2 or 3 week look aheads or like a weekly meeting with their project managers and their like labor foreman, their general foreman, to try to understand what the needs of each project are and where we're able to allocate labor. So you can now take, what's historically been sort of a meeting on notepads, and if y'all get ahead of it prior to the meeting, everybody will essentially have their labor requests in here in terms of these planned hours. So that's the tip of that triangle. Then we're going to talk about what are called scheduled hours. During that meeting, we're going to figure out who needs what. Okay, Justin needs programming done. Let's go ahead and put some bodies to that. These are what we would refer to as now scheduled hours. Now, that would be the second point in the triangle. The third point of the triangle would be the actual hours. So I've planned for some hours, I've scheduled hours. Now, based on the time cards that are getting filled out, the actual time is now coming back against this project. And if you look at each of those 3 points and look at the deltas between the 3, you'll quickly understand whether you're falling behind on these projects. Good basic example. I planned, right? I'm requesting 1,000 hours. Well, I was only able to get 800 on the schedule. right? I'm already 200 hours down now, man hours down. Then when time cards come back in, I see that a couple people were out sick. So I was only able to get 600 hours of actual production. And it'll paint a very clear picture of when and where you're falling behind so that you all can leverage those hours back and forth. There's a question about timekeeping. What'll happen is as this time's getting entered either by the foreman or by the individual, we're going to generate time cards. Now, today we're focusing on project management, but keep in mind that BuildOps handles both your service work as well as your project work. And then what we'll find is all of those hours, no matter which side of the house I'm working on, will come back in here to develop a time card. I'll be able to see what they were where they were working, what they were working on, how long they were working for. You can make them punch in and punch out, or just fill out kind of a regular sort of grid type of timesheet. And then typically the review and approval will be done here in BuildOps. If I don't like their time, I can tell them to kick rocks and try again. I could say, hey, buddy, change your time. Right. In which case they'll get an alert on their mobile app. Maybe I'm, not that type of guy. I'm just going to come in here and make the adjustment for them. Either way, we're going to review and approve the time. Once this time has been approved, we're then going to export it to whatever your third party payroll system is, right? Is it Paychex? Is it Paylocity? Is it ADP? Is it QuickBooks? Is it Sage? Is it it doesn't matter, right? Is it mom and pop down the street from your shop payroll service? Doesn't matter. Any piece of information, um, any piece of information that is entered into the system, we can then produce a custom export. So we'll align with whatever your payroll service is, however they like to see that payroll data. Is it all by person? Is it by day? Is it by job? Is it something else? No problem. Do they want columns? Do they want rows? Do they want totals? Whatever it happens to be, as long as the data is in BuildOps, which it will be, we'll be able then to export this data. In my example, I've got the ADP export turned on, but that's just essentially by coincidence, right? There's any other options available. Eric asked a question about the forms and where y'all might find that. Depending if you're working on the mobile app or you're working from the back office, on a project, the forms, you'll be able to find those within the daily report. So again, we try to encompass everything within that daily report. So they only have one stop to enter the time for their crew, put their notes in, fill out their safety forms. If we're talking from the back office, you'll see it under what I'd call the company dropdown. And then there's a section in here called forms. If you don't see that, probably don't have access to that. If that's the case, feel free to reach out to somebody on your team or somebody on our team, and we'd be happy to help you out with those if needed. That said, let's go ahead and jump back into our project and wrap up on our document control side, and then we'll get back into some of our budgeting and billing. One of the other major documents that we want to keep track of would be our change order requests. Now, what we're doing is we're bubbling up the revenue, the cost, the profit, and the margin on your approved change orders. And again, where is the risk? The risk is those outstanding change order dollars. So we want to keep an eye on those. Now, if you notice here in my change order log, I've got two tabs. I've got what we call a change order request, but then I have something else here called a potential change order. What's a potential change order? It's just that, right? It could be a change order later. It might be a change order tomorrow. I might just want to keep track of it for purposes. So that said, our folks out in the field utilizing their mobile app can also pull this up on their side as well. So we'll allow them to create a potential change order out in the field if they needed to, because again, we don't want them necessarily adding entries directly into our formal change order log, because maybe it is a change order, maybe it's not. At this point, a potential change order, you can also think of that as just like maybe like a draft change order as well. That said, if I needed to, I could take one or many of these potential change orders and convert them right into change order requests. And when we're talking about change order requests, we're doing the full pricing exercise right here within BuildOps, right? What's my labor cost? How much am I marking that up? My material line items, any equipment, subcontractor. You're doing all the pricing exercise here in Build Ops. It'll generate that PDF copy that you can send off for approval. And what happens? Inevitably, what happens a lot of the time is they'll take 2 or 3 or 10 of my individual change order requests, and they'll approve them under one of their change order numbers. And their change order number might have nothing to do with my change order number. And so I'm able to capture that, combine those, and then this is the entry that'll be added to our schedule of values for billing. We hadn't talked about that yet, but on the project side, we're able to do full-blown progress billing with our schedule of values, and if required, an AIA pay application, AIA-like pay application. That said, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about that and hop into finance. Here in the finance tab, the first place it'll take me is to my cost budget. Now, when I'm reviewing my cost budget, I can change the way this is being grouped on the fly. So if I want to look at it by cost type, I can just click one button. The totals are still the same, certainly, but the layout, the breakout is a little bit different. Well, I can see I'm going over on materials. Well, where is that money going? You can then have what we would call a work breakdown structure, which may have phase codes and cost codes, right? So 2 or 3 levels. If you're a multi-departmental company, you could have different departments. For example, like some folks will do mechanical and plumbing, or they'll have sheet metal and programming, whatever it happens to be. You can break your project budgets up by cost type, cost code, phase, and department. Now, that's a lot of breakdowns. You don't have to do that, obviously, if you don't need to. But you got to understand not just that I'm going over, but to be able to take proactive action, understand where you're going over. So we'd always recommend at least a little bit of breakdown so that y'all can understand where those dollars are going. Now, if you ever needed to, you could actually chase these costs all the way down the rabbit hole to the transaction level. So I can see which transactions are impacting that particular, cost account on this project, all the way down to the transaction level. Well, we want to talk about reporting, and specifically WIP reporting, work in progress reporting. And for a system to be able to accurately calculate your WIP, you need certain building blocks to do that. And you're seeing those building blocks here, right? We've got your original budget plus your approved change orders. It automatically goes over there. No more having to update the spreadsheet. We're going to see committed cost. As soon as I cut a PO, I want that out of my budget, right? I'm not going to say I don't care as a project manager whether or not we paid the vendor, but I don't care if we paid him or not. I want that out of my budget. Now, obviously, once we do receive those goods, it'll move into actual cost. And then through the pay application module, I'm able to see how much you billed. And based on your cost and based on your billings, I can let you know if you're overbilled or underbilled on one of these projects. That said, I sat on a CFMA conference, seminar once. They explained to me when to be over and when to be under. But to be honest with you, it went over my head a little bit. In general, what I know is we're not banks. We don't want to be financing this work if we can avoid it. So we want our billings to at least keep up with our costs. If not being a little bit overbilled, expect to be a little bit overbilled early on. That said, because I know your budgets and what you spend and what you build, and also what percent complete you guys are. Now, because I have all these building blocks, it's very easy for me to be able to do detailed forecasting as well as full-blown WIP reporting. And we'll talk a little bit more about WIP reporting here in just a second. But again, to kind of get those building blocks in place, going to do that part of that through a pay application. When I'm going to come in somewhere between the 20th and 25th of the month, and I'm going to go ahead and fire up my pay application. You've got your original schedule of value line items up here at top, plus your approved change orders. You can also track and bill for retainage as well. And when you go to increment this, you can either do it as a percentage or you can do it as a dollar amount for each of your line items. That's totally up to you. And based on those inputs, that'll generate either just a regular invoice that you can send off, or it'll generate an AIA G702, G703 type of pay app. And ultimately, if you needed to, you could attach the invoice behind this as well. But most folks just end up sending this off. One of the last things I wanted to touch on here would be my procurement and my submittal process. When we're talking about submittals, we always have like sometimes on a project, dozens and dozens of individual pieces of equipment or systems or whatever materials that have to be submitted on and approved prior to installation, right? We've all kind of, you know, run into this problem at least once in our careers, hopefully early on, and we learn the lesson. But we go out there to do an installation, and customer walks up after we're all done and goes, "Oh, that's the wrong one." You're like, "No, this is the right one," and there's no documentation to tie that up. So a lot of the folks I talk to are real heavy on the submittal side of things. So what are we doing here in build ops? We're going to be breaking up the individual line items for those that we want to submit on. And it's up to you. I've got some folks who just put in one line item and call it submittal items. I've got other folks who will break it down in sort of the detail that you all see here. And for each of these individual line items, I can add any number of attachments to it. And when I add those attachments in, I can now use those to build out the package itself. So here's basically my submittal item registry. And then on top of that, I can go ahead and choose which of these items I want to group together for submission. Everybody wants them a little bit differently. Some folks want them by spec section. Some folks want them by subsection. Some folks want individual items added or submitted on their own. Some folks want everything all in one package. So we give you all the flexibility. In this case, I grab the RTUs and the hangers. And again, not only is BuildOps tracking your submittals, it's generating that submittal package as well, right? The customer facing document. And what we're doing here is we've got our cover page with our table of contents. And before um, each set of line items, we'll slip in a slip sheet in here that'll allow differentiation between each section of that submittal package. So here's the hangers. Okay, now I'm on to the RTUs and be able to roll through it that way. And again, it'll do this automatically. Um, Sully had a question. Yeah, Sully absolutely will provide a recording to this once it's all done. And then you also had a question about office and admin time. While it is possible to track admin time, typically what we're looking to track in build ops is time that is going to be costed to the job. So if your back end, team is costing their time to a job, absolutely, we want them to go ahead and put their time in. They could do it through the mobile app. They can do it just through the back end. Or if their time isn't going to a job, there's not a lot of benefit that I get in build ops from tracking their time there. You could have a job called office and put the time against that. So definitely possible, but we want to really focus on the any time that's impacted my job cost. Last piece of this puzzle is going to be material procurement. And the reason why I talk about submittals before I talk about material procurement is because these are able to be tied together. While it's not a requirement, you can start this procurement process with a bill of materials. Essentially, this is a list of all the items, major items that need to be ordered on this project. And while this is why this is cool, is we're able to tie our material items to submittal packages, making sure that those are approved prior to releasing the POs, to our vendors. Also, we're able to capture the required by date. So when do I need these by, as well as the lead weeks. So how long is it going to take to get this? Now it's very simple for build ops to do the math. You take when it's required by minus the lead weeks, gives you when you need to order it by. And again, being able to provide automated reporting like that to your project management team, I think is very useful. Once you do issue a purchase order, we're going to be tracking that PO and understand, what has it been fulfilled? Have we actually placed the order yet? Is it still in draft? And then once the material shows up on site, we can actually receive that material and ultimately see our quantities orders versus our quantity received. So that way, we're staying on top of the material procurement on these projects. One thing I wanted to touch on is the reporting capabilities in BuildOps. I mentioned this at the beginning. We can't measure, excuse me, we can't manage what we can't measure. Essentially, any information that I've taken the effort to put into BuildOps, I can report on. And what I'm showing you here today are just examples because this reporting capability is totally customizable. But essentially, what are we doing? Well, we've got reports, and on top of those reports, we can build dashboards. And a dashboard is essentially a collection of different reports showing me all that information on one page. Now, we can show that information to you however you all see fit. We can do what we call a scorecard where we're taking some number and rolling that up and totaling it, maybe doing some calculations. Maybe we've got a goal, right? That we're tracking how we're doing against that goal. Maybe it's a line chart, bar chart, pie chart, heat map. And then of course, like your old fashioned tables, right? And even though we are taking a look at this information at a roll up view, you can expand any of these reports to see all the details and dive in and see more details. You can also have expandable reports where you can go ahead and open those up to expose additional information. Also, you're able to you're able to add custom reports. So any piece of information, even if we don't happen to be doing the math on that, you're able to add those calculations into the system to go ahead and crunch those numbers. Now, a lot of times when we're looking at this stuff, it's processing all this information essentially live for me. So, it'll do all the calculations. I don't have to wait till the end of the month. If cost was entered today and I go in and take a look at that report, I'm going to see that cost in there. And then from there, be able to dive in and understand any of those details that might be important. We can also do what we call conditional formatting as well. So if I want to highlight some stuff in red, basically all those same Excel tricks that you've learned over the years, you can actually implement those here in BuildOps. And kind of to illustrate that, what a lot of my folks will do is add a column to the report and do some custom calculations. So, let's take this column, divide it by this other column, multiply it by this third column, and take the whole thing and divide it by 100. Again, I don't know what that gives you, but you can put these custom calculations, these custom formulas in, and it's a set it and forget it type of situation. It's now always in there, and I don't have to pull custom Excel reports to get the information I need. Also, any of these reports, we mentioned this before, we can set them up so they're automatically emailed to you at a cadence of your choosing, right? Is this something you want to see Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays? Is this a once a week thing? Is it a once a quarter thing? Either way, it'll be waiting for you in your inbox whenever you all expect it to be in there. So, we're happy to answer any other questions that you guys might have. But this was a good overview of some of the strategies we can utilize to really make this as smooth as possible and make the transition to BuildOps as smooth as possible because we're not really asking folks to do anything that they're not doing already. There, you guys are already doing this type of work. But what we're doing here is giving them a better mousetrap to do it. Just curious if anybody's out there, wants to learn a little bit more. We can definitely dive into more detail, give you all maybe like a personalized demo to understand what the particular needs, of your company are. So if I hadn't put you to sleep already, grab your mouse, let us know if you'd like any more information. Really appreciate everything and the opportunity to chat with you all today. We'll take care of the house cleaning items and get this stuff sent off to you, but appreciate everything. Thank you all.